In school, we're told the Roman Ninth Legion was simply reassigned to the Rhine, a routine clerical move by a growing empire. But what if 5,000 battle-hardened soldiers didn't just leave, they were erased, and the reality they encountered on the edge of the world was so disturbing that the official record had to be sanitized? When the Ninth first marched into the deep woods of Britain, they expected primitive tribes, but instead they found ruins they could not explain, and astronomical alignments so precise they made Roman mathematicians uncomfortable. And they quickly realized they weren't civilizing a wilderness, but stepping into a landscape already saturated with an extraordinary and least understood story of human prehistory. Earthworks that defied their engineering logic, a memory in the land pointing to a civilization ancient even to them. And as the Legion pushed further north, local guides began to whisper about a terrifying genius embedded in the stones, a genius that would make the Ninth Legion the first lost ghost of the empire. To understand what they truly faced, you have to see it through Roman eyes. They were used to the logic of the grid, yet they stood before Stonehenge and Silbury Hill, mounds built with 200,000 tons of chalk removed using only antler picks. And they watched people move 80-ton payloads across bogs and forests in feats that today would require heavy industrial cranes, confronting a sacred geography that organized the physical world into a system of meaning they could not decode. And their response wasn't just curiosity, it was something close to fear, because they began to realize the people they were fighting possessed a body of scientific knowledge expressed in the only medium they had, which was stone. The Ninth then moved toward the cliff galleries, much like those found in the Pacific today, where ancestors are kept alive as spirits to protect the living. And in Britain, they encountered the Druids, a specialist class who spent 20 years in oral training mastering knowledge about the stars and the nature of things. Not merely priests, but memory keepers holding a 2,500-year-old truth. And the Romans felt a sudden paralysis when facing these traditions, as if the landscape itself was fighting back, until the Ninth Legion moved to strike the heart of this ancient order and vanished from the pages of history entirely. Why is this story so hard to find? Because mainstream history has a habit of burying what it cannot explain. Just as modern governments today are actively planting forests over colossal ruins to hide them from satellite scans, the Romans used deliberate silence to erase the Ninth's failure. And Julius Caesar himself, though fascinated by the Druids, remained conspicuously silent about the great monuments like Stonehenge, a political choice to protect a convenient version of history. And historians claim the Ninth was simply moved to a different front. But if that's true, why have we found their broken artifacts hidden in the same sacred pits used for prehistoric rituals? The people of Britain were a hybrid in the truest sense, carrying genes and secrets from the very first hunter-gatherers, understanding cognitive mapping and resource cycles in ways that surpassed Roman capability. And the Romans weren't just fighting men, they were fighting a genetic and cultural continuity that reached back to the Ice Age. And according to local legend, the Ninth Legion didn't die in battle, they were consumed by the very land they tried to conquer. Think about the pyramids in China. Over 100 monuments clustered around ancient capitals, declared natural landforms while being covered in mature trees. The Ninth Legion's fate is covered by the same kind of intellectual forest, where Roman coins found at Stonehenge and votive offerings in sacred springs are framed as unremarkable. And the official story says the Ninth ended its days in the East. But new forensic data suggests the biological report of their end is far more disturbing. When you stand in the ditch at Avebury and look up at the bank towering above you, you feel the vertigo of deep time. And the Romans felt this too, realizing that the civilization they were bringing was actually a step backward compared to the mathematical machine of the megalithic world, a technological memory older than the Ice Age. And though they tried to co-opt the sacred sites by building their temples directly over the old ones, they couldn't co-opt the Ninth Legion's disappearance, because the Legion had found something that could not be easily erased. On the shores of Anglesey, Roman soldiers were seized by a strange appearance that overcame them. They weren't just looking at soldiers. They were looking at a lineage untainted by the outside world, practicing rituals handed down through uncountable generations. And this wasn't a war of swords, it was a war of worldviews. And in the middle of this spiritual conflict, 5,000 Roman citizens simply blinked out of existence. We are constantly told these ancient people were primitive, yet their structures were aligned to true north with accuracy that surpasses most modern buildings, and the academic world is determined to ignore the physical evidence of this global interconnected blueprint, preferring to tell you the Ninth Legion moved to the Rhine rather than admit they were defeated by a terrifying genius. But satellite imaging is now finding impossible geometric structures hidden beneath the dirt, and what they are finding in the north of Britain is a series of mass graves that don't fit Roman military protocol. The people who built the megalithic tradition were a hybrid population, fed, clothed, and housed at a level no Victorian scholar would have believed possible, trading in amber and glass from as far as the Baltic. And the Ninth Legion didn't walk into a wasteland, they walked into a thriving international trade node. So why did they suddenly stop sending reports back to Rome? If we restore the original meanings to the accounts of the time, we see the Romans encountered a predatory species of resistance from Druids who memorized knowledge about the stars and the power of the immortal gods, an existential threat to the entire project of Romanization, which is why the Romans had to destroy the Druids as memory keepers of an alternative identity. But as they struck the memory keepers, the Ninth Legion's own memory began to fade. Consider Must Farm, the Bronze Age Pompeii, where people lived in roundhouses over water with textiles comparable to modern hand-woven fabrics. This was the sophistication the Ninth tried to suppress, a civilization that was mature, complex, and impressive when Rome was still a collection of villages. And the physical evidence of this achievement was too massive to demolish, so the Romans did the next best thing and changed the story. The landscape of Britain is a text of extraordinary depth still waiting to be read. The stones at Stonehenge and the mounds at Avebury are silent testimony to a civilization the Romans could not contain. And every year, new LiDAR scans reveal massive geometric grids invisible to the naked eye. Because the official story was a calculated decision to protect a convenient version of history. And we shouldn't accept the primitive label anymore, for it was a politically motivated construction used to justify empire building. And historical justice requires us to look at the intelligence and intentionality of those who came first. People who built a relationship with the sky that we are only just beginning to understand. The Ninth Legion may be lost to Rome, but their story is dormant in the landscape. And the Roman legions felt a vertigo when they saw the silent testimony of Stonehenge, because they knew they were looking at deep time. We should feel that same awe today, because the Ninth Legion didn't just vanish. They were the first casualties of a war on memory that we are still fighting. And the stones stand, the earthworks endure, and the truth is still legible in the landscape for anyone with the capacity to read it. Because if a structure the size of a mountain can be swallowed by trees for thousands of years, just imagine what else is still hiding in the dark.